Hi, I'm Becky Rupert McMahon, Chief Executive of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. Cleveland is getting ready to elect a new mayor for the first time in over 16 years. How well do you know the two final candidates, Justin Bibb and Kevin Kelley? They certainly have some similarities, but they also present clear differences. CMBA President Rose Fini recently had the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with both Kevin and Justin. She asked them questions of particular importance to the legal community. And here are their answers. I invite you, listen, compare, and decide. And then most importantly, go vote on November 2nd. The next chapter in Cleveland's history is about to be written.
Justin, welcome. Thank you for sitting down with us, the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association today. As you know, for the last 2 years, the steering committee has been meeting to discuss the new Justice Center and the new jail. As mayor, what will you do to advance the change in criminal justice reform along the lines of bail reform, using the diversion centers?
Well, we are at a critical juncture in this country and in the city after we witnessed the tragic murder of our brother, George Floyd. And we've seen what happens here in Cleveland when we have incidences of police misconduct, incidences where our criminal justice system continues to disenfranchise people of color. As mayor, I think the first thing I can do is make sure I use the bully pulpit to advocate for criminal justice reform at the city level, county level, the state level, and federal level. The other thing I would say is working to end cash bail in the city of Cleveland, where we have jurisdiction, is something I'm going to be focused on as mayor. And then making sure we actually use our diversion center and working with my prosecutor to make sure we're using that facility to make sure we're getting our residents that need the help the most to give them support they need to live their best life. That's critical.
Now let's switch to voting rights. Our election processes and procedures are under attack around the country. And here locally, we see turnout is pretty low. Talk to me about your thoughts on how we can improve voter participation.
Well, we have some structural issues in this nation right now as it relates to voter rights and access to the ballot box. I think we need comprehensive federal legislation in Congress to make sure we can improve civil rights access to voting reforms. The other thing I would say is this. We've experienced in Cleveland, I believe, a city government that has undermined the will of the people. For the first time in nearly 100 years, we finally have a public comment where residents can go to city council and talk about what they're seeing in their city and truly get access to the local government. The other thing I would say is this. We as leaders need to do a better job of connecting how city government impacts the lived experiences of our residents. That's why I'm running for mayor, because I believe that your mayor's office and your mayor is probably more important in some ways than the President of the United States. And until we do a better job of meeting voters where they are to get them involved in local government, we won't see more folks showing up to vote, particularly in local elections.
So switching now to First Energy Stadium. We recently had a call by state legislators to have that name removed from our stadium and return it to the Cleveland Browns Stadium. We know that there's a sponsorship agreement in place. You probably haven't had a chance to look at that agreement yet, but thoughts on removing the First Energy name from the stadium?
Well, I would say this. I ran my campaign for mayor on a platform focused on climate and environmental justice. And we've seen in this election how corrupt influences have really undermined the ability of our residents to have access to clean air and good renewable energy. Cleveland Public Power right now is actually under a 50-year contract with a utility company that is really undermining our ability to afford good, affordable electricity in the city of Cleveland. And I'm open to any negotiation we can with the Browns ownership to make sure we can have confidence that the name of the Browns Stadium reflects the values that I have as mayor and the values of the residents of Cleveland.
And since we're by the lakefront, Burke Lakefront Airport, any thoughts that you could share?
I think that we have an untapped gem in our lakefront. I get jealous when I go to Chicago and other cities across the country that have really maximized their lakefront for their residents. And I believe it's past time we have a strong and honest conversation about the future of Burke, because we can find a different use to make sure we can truly have a lakefront that's equitable, that's world class, and empowers Cleveland to be one of the best cities in America.
Looking at our legal profession and the law firms, we're seeing that there is some reduced occupancy downtown. And I think that reflects other businesses and corporations. As we are looking in post-COVID environments, what are some thoughts you have to keep the vibrancy of downtown?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is really tout the importance of getting vaccinated, trusting the science. I'm happy that President Biden has increased at a national level the efforts to encourage Americans to get the vaccine shot. The other thing I would say is this: as mayor, I have to work with our corporate CEOs downtown and our central business district to encourage them to get their employees to come back town. We need to make sure that we have active programming going on in our central business district, in our malls downtown, in Public Square. Bringing the food trucks back for Walnut Wednesdays, because those are the things that folks that work downtown and live downtown want to have. They want to embrace those amenities, and we got to go on the offensive as we claw our way out of the pandemic. But getting folks vaccinated is the most important thing we can do to get our economy going again.
Turning to the critical issue of evictions, we saw the moratorium in place for over a year, but now that's coming to an end. And while there are funds available to help tenants, those funds will soon run out. Are you thinking about ways that we can also help once those federal dollars come to an end, so that we don't see a huge influx in evictions?
Yeah, well, if I were mayor, I would be using some of the money we're getting from the American Rescue Plan to set aside for eviction assistance to keep residents in their home. The other thing I would say is this: at the local level, we should be passing pay to stay legislation so that folks can stay in their homes during this pandemic, or if they're struggling, that they can have a pathway to stay in their home and try to get back on their feet and live a life with dignity. And then I would also say is this: excited to see our city embrace the right to counsel legislation. I think we should be exploring ways to expand that criteria to include more working class families and individuals, so they can stay in their home and have the access they need to avoid any kind of eviction.
Your reaction to our city's response to the COVID-19, whole pandemic, are you satisfied with how we've gone through it? Would you do things differently?
Well, the one thing I was not satisfied with was just the lack of visibility from our mayor and city government. In most cities across the country, you had mayors and community leaders going door to door to make sure folks got tested for COVID-19. In some cities, they used the flu vaccination process to test out how to make sure you can have a drive-through clinic once the COVID-19 vaccine was available. And the biggest thing I've heard from voters across the city is that when the pandemic happened, no one knew who to go to for information. We have so many information gaps in this city right now, and the next mayor must work with our clergy, must work with our grassroots organization, must work with organizations like the Bar Association to connect our residents and key organizations to the information they need to ensure that we can get out of this pandemic and get our economy going again.
As the Bar Association, we pay particular attention to litigation that's going on, and we see that the Buckeye Institute has filed the litigation to impact and challenge that distribution of the income tax that was allowed to occur, to continue even though folks were working from home and not necessarily the jurisdiction of Cleveland. If they are successful, thoughts about bridging those gaps left?
Well, I'd say right now is the time for big city mayors in Ohio to talk to this governor and talk to our state legislator to articulate the value proposition of Ohio cities. We know that from Cleveland to Cincinnati to Columbus, our cities are responsible for a large share of the state's GDP. And this litigation and proposed legislation could undermine the future of our competitiveness as a state. Secondly, if this does pass, I as mayor need to work with the county executive and other key stakeholders to really reimagine the role of city government. We're going to have to do more with less, unfortunately, to ensure that we can continue to provide high quality basic city services to our residents. But the third thing I would say is we need to make the case to our employers who employ people in the city of Cleveland to ensure that their residents can come back to work on our central business district so we can maintain that tax base and that tax revenue over time.
Justin, thank you for running for office.
Thank you.
It takes a lot of energy and a lot of hard work, and we're glad to see a competitive race for such a critical role in our city.
You don't get a lot of sleep, but it's well worth it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep.